future investors, possible proprietors, and clueless colonists. Let me introduce you to something I like to call the drama history of New France. Something we have created to persuade you to come to us. So, let us start off with something pretty important. History. Because we all know, to be successful in the future, you have to understand the past. Now let's go on to the actual history of it. So, in 1536, that is when our colony began. Because King Henry IV of France decided to commission an expedition to go to the St. Lawrence River and explore and do other expedition type things. Now this expedition was led by someone pretty important named Jacques Cartier. Cartier was important because he helped establish trading contacts with the natives. He was friendly to them and pretty nice compared to some other people. And that proved to be very beneficial to the colony of New France, especially in the later years. So, let's go fast forward a bit. Maybe go 1536. Let's add 72 years. That's a nice round number. 72 years plus 1536 years is 1608 years. And that is when Quebec was founded by none other than the famous Samuel de Champlain, another French explorer. So you might be asking yourself, why was Quebec founded? Well, Quebec acted as a trading post, and it offered a commanding control over the surrounding waterways and served as a key center for none other than fur trade. Take a guess at what animal this is. Go for it. Shout it out in class. If you guessed giraffe, you might be wrong. It was in fact a beaver, and it was quite important to Quebec's success. So, after the establishment of this settlement, Champlain proceeded to make peace with the local natives, known as the Algonquin tribes and the Huron tribes, in large part to prevent attacks on the small settlements from the more aggressive and dangerous tribes. In exchange for the friendship, the two tribes asked for the French people to help them defeat their big enemies, known as the Iroquois. Let's jump forward to the year 1628. In the year 1628, you might be wondering what happened. Well, in that year, a new threat emerged for the French colony: the British, otherwise known as Great Britain. You might be wondering, what happened in the year that was so noteworthy? Well, let me tell you. You gotta be patient, okay? So, in that year, the British blockaded the colony of Quebec, forcing them to surrender, and ultimately taking Champlain hostage. And that happened in 1629. So Quebec fell into British hands, and Champlain was taken prisoner. He was released in 1632, And 3 years later, Champlain died in 1635. So let's go 115 years later into the future. The population of New France, the colony, grew listlessly. For any of you uneducated people, that means kind of slowly, lethargically. And the colony would be ceded to the British at the end of the 7 Years' War. Now, I believe it would be appropriate to talk about the economy of New France. So, generally, the economy of New France was centered around one big thing. Can any of you guess? Well, if you were paying attention, you might be able to guess what this animal is. Take a guess. If you guessed coyote, you might be wrong. It was actually a beaver, otherwise known as the fat rat with a flat tail. Now I think it'd be pretty appropriate to talk about the people that hunted these beavers. These people, known as the runners of the woods, or in French as
coureurs des bois,
hunted the beavers and generally gathered their pelts and sold them. Through their exploits, the
coureurs des bois
allowed the colony of New France to expand all the way from Quebec down into modern-day Louisiana. On a side note, many of the names in the lower parts of New France can attribute their names to some of the
coureurs des bois,
such as Baton Rouge, Des Moines, and Grand Teton. The
coureurs des bois
also helped fight some of the first wars in the Americas, such as the King William's War from 1689 to 1697, as well as Queen Anne's War from 1702 to 1713. The
coureurs des bois,
however, did not travel alone. French trappers were known to have recruited Native Americans into the trade and were also accompanied by Catholic missionaries. However, such actions decimated the American populations, as more and more natives succumbed to European diseases. The natives were also introduced to alcohol, and we all know about that. Now, there were also a number of economic hotspots throughout New France. The first of these hotspots was the trading settlement of Quebec, which we all know was founded in 1608 by who? Champlain, of course. Offering commanding control of the surrounding waterways Trading posts soon shot up all around the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River, as well as the Hudson's Bay. There was another really important outpost, and that was in New Orleans, founded in 1718. The addition to New Orleans allowed the French to have complete control over the Gulf of Mexico, which in turn allowed them to block the Spanish' entry into the Gulf of Mexico. Now that the French controlled the Mississippi River, they developed a plethora of trading outposts along it. Because of these trading outposts, it allowed them to ship large amounts of grain down the Mississippi River, as well as furs, and then it could be shipped to Europe. I want to dedicate this next portion of the video to Champlain, because now we're going to talk about geography and town development of New France. There would be no town development, there would be no geography without the most basic part of colonization: exploration. Exploration was needed so much for this, and we're going to talk about this right now. And that's why I dedicated this portion to Champlain. As we know, the first settlement was Quebec, and that was set up in 1608 by Champlain. The geography of New France was made up of three regions. One, Arcadia, which was the most northeastern portion of the territory. Number two, Canada, which was the northwestern and middle portions of the territory. And finally, number three was Louisiana, which is the farthest region south that France had successfully colonized in North America, and it was on the present-day Gulf of Mexico. New France consisted of two primary cities, and those cities were Quebec and Montreal. Quebec had two major sections: the upper town, which was wealthier than the rest of Quebec, and the lower town, which was made up of water docks and warehouses, and that was where the less privileged people live. The other city, Montreal, was known as the frontier town. Now, you may be asking me, why is it called the frontier town? That doesn't make sense. They were all frontiers. Well, Montreal was the link from the outside of the major points of the colony to the inside. Because of this location, Montreal was a large economic center that played a big role in trade, most notably the fur trade, which was, of course, the biggest economic motivator for the French people. And let's play Guess That Animal again. Could you guess what animal this is? Because it was pretty involved in the fur trade. If you guessed Daffy Duck, you'd be wrong. It's a beaver. Now, water played perhaps the largest role in New France's locational development. The land was divided so that all farms were near a river or a lake, so farmers could have a primary source that was quick and easy to access. As more and more towns appeared along water, transportation on the water grew and more waterways were constructed. The increase in transportation caused more urbanization along water, and in return, this urbanization caused more waterways for transportation to be built. These two things assisted each other's expansion. As for New France's town development, permanent settlements and economic development were the primary goals. These two ideas linked with each other. As trade increased, more towns and trading posts had to be constructed, of course, which strengthened New France's footing in its territory. Chartered companies, which were hired by the crown in France, helped to further stimulate exploration and economic development. New settlers were also sent to New France with resources to support its development. Thank you very much for your time and your attention for our presentation. I hope you pick New France as your wonderful colony to settle.